You thought your daffodil bulbs were onions. That's becoming less common now.
Yeah, I read about that. That was an actual case, wasn't it, in Bristol?
There have been quite a few cases. Again, if you're elderly, you're more susceptible to the effects because theoretically it shouldn't be fatal. It's just incredibly severe diarrhea and vomiting, which can lead to electrolyte imbalance. And then, if you don't get the correct treatment, then it does lead on to much more serious effects. So it's mistaken identity is the biggest thing.
Do you think that the narcissus is one of the most common accidental poisonings, or are there others kind of worldwide that crop up now and then?
Worldwide, I mean, it's a completely different
different ball
picture,
game, yeah.
No, daffodil's not very common at all, actually.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I was listening to another episode about houseplants in particular, and I wondered, they were discussing the US version of mistletoe. I don't know what the species is, but it's obviously different to our European one that we commonly get at Christmas time, because they were saying that theirs isn't poisonous, but I think ours is. Is that correct?
Oh, okay. The toxicity of ours is quite complicated, and it's not actually particularly poisonous. It's a theoretically poisonous plant.
Right.
They're probably restricted mainly to the seeds inside the fruit. So again, you have to chew them,
right,
which people just don't. And it's not an attractive plant to actually eat. And you can actually get mistletoe tea. So.
Oh. And that's made of the leaves, is it, or the berries?
Yes, the leaves.
So I suppose that does bring us nicely on to houseplants. Again, there are some that I've grown and specified and supplied to clients that actually are quite harmful. One of the ones that I've actually sold on is the euphorbia, and I don't know how you pronounce this, but I'm going to have a go. It's tirukali.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a fairly common houseplant, but actually,
that's a nasty one.
Yeah, that does look quite iffy to have indoors. And crotons are another one that are quite common and that you mention in your book as being quite dodgy to have around. Are there any other house plants that we commonly grow that are really quite dangerous?
Okay. Well, the croton that you probably supplied would have been the Podium variegatum. They're not the same as the croton that's very poisonous.
Right, okay.
It's one of those the names are confusing. But the nastiest group of houseplants are the ones in the arum family. So you've got the dumb cane is probably the nastiest one. But all of them, so you've got painter's palette and peace lily and spathiphyllum, that is peace lily, sorry, the philodendron epimedium, is it? There's a whole group of these houseplants. Potentially they all have the calcium oxalate crystals. That would cause oral irritation, and then you can get swelling, and the crystals allow the entry of irritant toxins into your mouth and any soft parts. So if you swallow it, then you can get restricted throats, restricted airways, as well as the pain. But it's mainly the dumb cane, so the Dieffenbachia, that's the nastiest one.
Okay. And that's if you eat it, and presumably that's more of a problem, I would have thought, for animals and possibly children, is it?
Yeah, so interestingly, in Scandinavia, they get a lot of cases of these houseplants, I think, because they have the long winter months, so they're not going out so much. North America, probably just because it's such a big country, they get an awful lot of cases from the arum family houseplants.
I suppose I should ask you, is there anything that you wouldn't grow in your own house or garden, plant-wise?
I wouldn't grow garden rue.
Okay.
And I'm very selective with euphorbia.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, I grew aconitum all the time. My daughter was growing up. She just proudly said to her friends, mustn't eat that because it's very poisonous.
Yeah. Bless her. You taught her well early on. Yeah. I mean, it is a scary one sometimes. If you're planting up someone's garden, you might shy away from something like that if you couldn't be there all of the time to make sure everyone was educated. But
yeah, I think I probably would. You do different things in your own garden. But
yes.
My advice to other people is if you've got small children, then you might want to not grow it for a while or put it at the back of the border. There are usually ways around it. So if you've got a plant that has berries that you worry about, then you can lift the branches out of the way, or you can trim it after flowering so that it doesn't set fruit for a few years.
Uh-huh.
So it's managing risk.
So most of us know not to eat rhubarb leaves or green potatoes, and also I heard that parsnips that remain in the ground too long can be a bit dodgy. But what are other things that are really common that people might not be aware of and that could cause accidental poisoning?
Maybe the things that poison animals, their pets, so that you don't think about. Raisins has only been known of for a relatively short period of time. So dogs shouldn't eat grapes or any of the dried versions, or fruitcake, for example.
Yeah.
And then with cats, it's the lilies. So any part of the lily plant, they eat it, but they can just brush against the pollen. And then if they lick the pollen off their fur, that's very bad for cats. It's the only cut flower that's actually labelled with a warning about eating it, sort of generally, although daffodils are now in supermarkets say not to be eaten. But lilies say mention that it's poisonous to cats.
Right.
I wouldn't grow those in the garden.
No.
Because I have cats, and you have other people's cats could come into the garden.
Yeah, actually, I have to say that's probably the only thing. I do worry a little bit about things, but I do grow most things, but I don't grow lilies because I've got cats too. But I was reading as well that Eramuris seeds can kill cats and dogs because apparently they're barbed seeds and they hook onto their coat. This isn't really related to the poisoning element, but they hook onto the coats, and then if they were to sniff up a seed, it kind of the only way is up for these seeds, so they can end up in their brain and actually killing them. So, which I had no idea about.
No, I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, I think the site that I was reading was based in the States, but yeah, it is scary when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, and then if you have anything that's vaguely grass-like or is grass-like but has rough edges, that can be very nasty for them because they cats and dogs will eat the grass for their digestion, and then it irritates too much.
And the other thing that I think I've done quite a number of times is had a fight with a horrible overgrown laurel hedge. Am I right in thinking that can be sometimes a little bit dodgy as well?
So cherry laurel, are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, that's cyanogenic glycosides. So when the plant material's damaged, then the chemicals mix together and you end up with cyanide being released. So if you're working on it to any large extent, make sure it's an open area. If you're shredding, don't do it in the garage because people have been overcome by fumes that way. And I've heard that more than one occasion where people bagged it up and then felt dizzy when driving the bags of chopped up material to the tip.
Yeah, I heard that.
So it's anecdotal, but I think it's probably based on fact.
Well, actually, when you're shredding laurel or even cutting it, you do get quite a strong smell from it. So I could well believe, that it is giving off something. Is that the same for burning? And is there anything that you maybe shouldn't put on your wood burner at home because it's giving off anything?
Yeah, so wood burners nowadays, they're supposed to be quite sealed, aren't they? So they shouldn't be giving off fumes into the house.
Uh-huh.
But if it's an open fire, then I would be careful with if you know that the wood is from a known poisonous species, then I would be careful about burning it in an open fire or something that you do get the smoke coming in. So laburnum even.
So I wanted to talk about just briefly at the end, really, the sort of the point in plants having poisons. So I get that they deter herbivores if they've got quick acting effects, but what really fascinated me was the plants that have the longer term effects that you touch on in your book. So they could potentially be cancer causing, or I think it's also, is it teratogenic, where they can cause problems in embryos. So what is the point in plants having and containing poisons like that would have such a long-term effect? Is it just coincidence that they're there?
I think some of them are just coincidence, and they also tend to have on say insects have a faster acting mechanism as well. Teratogens you can sort of understand, because if you end up with your predator not having viable offspring, then that's a way of reducing overall predation. The things that cause cancer after you've eaten them a long time, how does that happen? I don't know.
And how would a plant, again, this sounds probably a bit of a daft question really, but how would a plant know that having a high concentration of a particular chemical will deter a predator? Again, is that just coincidence, or is it an evolutionary process that's evolved? How does that come about?
Yeah, it's just evolution, survival of the fittest. So having the high concentration of this particular compound gave some evolutionary advantage to that plant. So it had more offspring, and then its offspring, the ones that had that compound, will have survived better than the ones that didn't, etc. So it's just a very slow process of evolution.
And also you get some plants who've got toxins that actually persist in their predators. How does that work, and what's the point in that?
That's one of the active fields at the moment. It hasn't been studied until fairly recently, so they don't obviously have all the answers yet. But it can work in various ways. So one of which is the toxin works on most predators by affecting a certain chemical pathway. Say it blocks an enzyme working properly. Then if you happen to have an adaptation that means the structure of that particular enzyme is slightly modified, then the toxin won't be able to bind to it, so you won't be poisoned by it. And then you can actually store that chemical in your tissue and it's not doing you any harm.
Right.
But if you're eaten by your predator, then they could be poisoned by it.
Okay, and just to wrap up, what is the oldest example of a plant that's possibly been used as a poison?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I think they found various things in these bog bodies. They found ergot alkaloids in them. Yeah, see, we just don't know, because ergot can be just contamination of grain, or it could have been taken intentionally to numb them or whatever in some way before they died. I don't know.
God, that's fascinating. What is the absolute number one deadliest plant in the world?
I hate this question.
Sorry.
It depends what you mean. I mean, I can't answer that question really, because it depends on so many things.
Okay, fine.
I think we've covered quite a few really poisonous ones. So.
But yeah, that's fair enough. Which one wouldn't you want to meet on a dark night?
Well, apart from the contact ones, I don't think I'd like to eat hemlock.
No. Is hemlock poisoning worse than the strychnine? Because that sounded fairly horrific as well.
Yeah, but I don't really think about the ones that are in different countries. That's another level of complication. Strychnine, that is nasty. That is a nasty way to go.
Yeah, it sounds it. There's lots of cases in your book that you refer to of poisonings, but is there anything that is genuinely untraceable?
No, everything's traceable.
Now, I know you have a new book coming out, which is about plant cures, which sounds as if it's the polar opposite of plants that kill, although it's not actually. What I found interesting is that some plants are beneficial in certain measures and yet fatal in others, and even that some poisonous plants provide antidotes to other poisonous plants.
The reason I do these books has been that I want people to actually see plants as being useful to them and worth preserving, worth worrying about. I know there's a bit of plant blindness you hear talked about now. So yeah, I just want people to know how interesting and wonderful plants are.
They are, yes. I think you might be preaching to the choir. Listen to my podcast,
yeah, that is a trouble, but it's not. Yeah, but it's worth saying, I think.
It is. It really is. Yeah. To go back to how they can be so good and so bad, one of my clients, I put in a Phytolacca americana in their garden. And it didn't survive actually in initial planting. And they wanted me to source them another one because he's a doctor and he uses that in his work, as a positive thing. So, and yet in the garden, it could potentially be quite a bad plant were you to eat it or do anything daft with it.
Yeah, it's strange. I've seen someone selling that as an edible plant.
No way.
I took issue with them a bit and they said, oh no, you can eat the leaves. And I was thinking, oh, I wouldn't.
No.
Really?
Actually, that's a really good question. I'm just going to ask you this because on Gardener's Question Time, Bunny Guinness ages ago said when you pinch out your sweet pea plants to encourage them to be more bushy, you can eat the clippings that you take off. But obviously sweet peas are different to normal garden peas. Do you know whether, they're Lathyrus, they're odorata, are they going to be dangerous for you?
Off the top, this would completely off the top of my head.
So I'm not going to. No one's going to hold you to this.
I wouldn't eat them. They'd probably be all right as a one-off. There's a thing called lathyrism.
Yeah.
That you get from other species of Lathyrus. It's when people actually eat the seeds. They use them for a flower, but there are certain conditions where it causes the poisoning. Because if you're using it as a famine food, so you're not balancing it out with other food sources, and I think you have to be on a low protein diet. and you take it long term, then it's poisonous. Sweet peas, people don't